Good afternoon, everyone. I first started to consider a career in engineering when I saw the Beagle 2 mission in the news and heard that British engineers and scientists were building this probe to go to Mars. I was so excited to think that there was a legitimate career sending stuff to explore outer space right here in the UK that I signed up to do a degree in mechanical engineering. By the age of 25, I'd landed my dream job working as the structures engineer on ExoMars, the very first European Mars rover mission, and the follow-up mission to that probe that had inspired me in the first place. Since then, engineering has given me experiences beyond my wildest dreams, taken me to places I never believed I'd go. Through my work on the rover, I've been invited on live primetime TV. When the rover's been covered in the news, I've had my opinions quoted in newspapers and had my interviews translated into 12 languages. I've been to Buckingham Palace and 10 Downing Street. I've given keynote speeches at conferences, met celebrities, royalty, astronauts. I've been asked to give a TEDx talk. So, how did I feel while I was having all of these amazing experiences and opportunities? Well, exactly the same as I do now, actually. Terrified. You might think that I'm standing here as this outgoing, gregarious young engineer who does exciting things in my day job and then merrily goes on telly to tell the world all about them. What you don't know is that I'm a fraud, an imposter. This isn't me. This is someone I can sometimes choose to be for limited periods of time, an act I can put on, a costume I can wear. So, who am I if I'm not this peppy, bright young industry ambassador? Well, I'm just an engineer. The most excruciatingly uncomfortable half hour of my life was while I was at university. I had to give a short presentation about a year-long internship I'd done just to a small group of my professors and course mates. I'd had a brilliant year, and I had loads to talk about, all of these tasks that I'd done and projects I'd worked on. I'd spent ages on my PowerPoint making sure that all the slides were just so, and I knew it inside out. But the night before, I barely slept a wink, and that morning I woke up gripped with the adrenaline of the full fight or flight response. It only got worse as the allotted hour approached, and by the time I stood up to speak, my shirt was stuck to my back with sweat, and I felt myself blush bright red as people's eyes fell on me. I stuttered and I stammered, and I forgot everything I was meant to say. I couldn't even see the script in my hand because my hands were shaking so violently. I'm pretty sure nobody could even hear me over the rustling of the paper. By the time I finished, I left the room and burst into tears. So, why was that such a traumatic experience for me? Why was I so far outside of my comfort zone that I was paralyzed with terror? Well, because I'm an introvert. So then, what's this introvert doing standing on the stage now talking to you? Well, because once upon a time I was so traumatized by that presentation ordeal at university that I vowed that I'd never let it happen again. But I knew that someday I'd have to present something to someone for my work. It would be ridiculous to think that I could avoid it forever. So my only other option was to practice. Now, in the STEM professions, we don't have enough young people coming into science, technology, engineering, and maths. So there's a big initiative to get ambassadors to go out to schools and talk to pupils about their work, inspire them about science and technology careers. And to me, that seemed like the safest space to practice. I mean, 6-year-olds don't ask you such challenging questions as panels of your peers and bosses, right? Completely wrong, but that's another story. So I went out and I spoke to this class of kids, and I pretended to be this confident young engineer, and I think I fooled them. But then I got asked to give another talk, and I had to fool another group of people. And then another one, and this was a bigger audience. And then it was, oh, would you just do this radio interview? And then it was TV, and now I've been pretending too well for too long. I can't stop now. People believe my act. I'm a victim of my own success. We don't have enough young people coming into the STEM professions, and because of that, coupled with my need to not have a full-blown panic attack every time I give a presentation, means that I've been pushed, or perhaps it's my fault and I've pushed myself, to become this ambassador, this spokesperson, to be a role model. But to become, or at least to present myself as a fictional character, this extrovert embodiment of myself in the process. All of the wisdom says that role models will make it all better, solve our recruitment problem. Amazing, gregarious, superstar role models will inspire young people to imagine themselves in similar careers and apply to join the industry. But I think that wisdom's wrong. My confidence is a complete facade. It's a pretense I use with large audiences or the media or whoever. And like they say, fake it till you make it. I've been pretending to be confident and to be an extrovert for such a long time that sometimes I even fool myself. But I'm beginning to realize that actually by doing this, I'm alienating those people that I most want to connect with, that I most want to inspire, that are the most likely to become great engineers. Engineers are foremost thinkers, contemplators. They like to think before they speak. They act based on science and logic. What does that sound like? Large studies, depending on the industry and the country, tend to suggest that between 2/3 and 80% of engineers are introverts. Yet we try to locate these people to be role models, to be ambassadors, to be spokespeople for the industry. But by definition, these people are either already extroverts or they use a mask of extroversion when they're talking in public. And either way, that means the standard engineering candidate is less likely to associate with them. It's a catch-22. The engineers and scientists that we learn about in school went down in history for their genius and their success. But STEM candidates understand statistics. They realise that it's highly unlikely that they're ever going to go down in history for their work. These might be inspirational people, but they're so far removed from the standard student that they can't be associated with either. The STEM stories that we tell are of the cutting edge, the world-leading, the groundbreaking flashes of genius and brilliance. But engineering is so rarely about genius flashes of brilliance. Millions of engineers have millions of pretty good ideas every day, and together we keep the industry moving on and keep it breaking new ground. Very few people are so supremely talented that they single-handedly advance the state of the edge with their own monster talent. But these are the people whose stories we tell of Elon Musk and Steve Jobs and Dyson, the inspirational figures that we want our next generation to aspire to. But how can they aspire to something that seems unrealistic to their logical, scientific brains? I worry that with this approach, we actually turn off far more engineers than we encourage. That's why I think we need to start talking about science in a different way. So, how do we frame these stories differently? What does a role model for an introvert even look like? Well, I don't know. I don't have the answer, some single magic bullet that's going to solve the problem. Like I told you, I'm not a genius. But like all engineering challenges, I can add my suggestions to the conversation and ask for others to add theirs, and together we might come up with a solution. So, what we're showing as engineering is a caricature of reality, glossy, airbrushed, photoshopped version. But maybe its lack of reality, its lack of faults and flaws and imperfections, is the biggest flaw of all. Maybe we need to show our humanity, our fallibility, our vulnerability to be truly associated with and identified with. Maybe we need to be honest about how many times we get it wrong before we get it right, how many times we think we might never get a solution. We try time and time again to get our product to pass the test with a tiny tweak here or a suggestion from a colleague there. Maybe we need to be honest that you don't need to be a genius scientist to be a scientist. You don't always need 100% to fit in. You don't need to be the next Einstein or Marie Curie or Brunel. There are hundreds of thousands of STEM professionals in this country, and only a handful will go down in history for their work. That's fine. Many, many more of those people will have a truly fulfilling career and enjoy what they do. I can't write an earth-shattering TED talk. And sometimes I find I'm on stage and I remember who I am and where I am, and I'm paralyzed with anxiety, or I blush bright red. But I do love my job as an engineer. I get to work on a rover that one day might be leaving tracks in the sand on Mars, where no human foot has ever trod. Standing alone on the surface of a distant planet and looking up and seeing the Earth as a tiny point of light in the night sky. Sending back pictures that no human eye has ever seen, and answering one of mankind's oldest questions: are we alone in the universe? Every time I remember that, it takes my breath away. I mean, mostly from imposter syndrome. There's no way they should be letting me work on this. Some days the problems seem impossible, like there's no way I can possibly solve them, there's no way I'm good enough. But I have a team of experts around me, and we talk about it and break it down, and somebody will suggest something I hadn't thought of, and together we seem to get those problems under control. And there's such a buzz from looking back and seeing that you've solved those problems that you thought were insurmountable, a huge satisfaction that always leaves me wanting more. For me, that's the joy of engineering. But none of it was groundbreaking or revolutionary. None of it was rocket science. It's just a really inspirational problem and a lot of everyday attempts by people to break it down and solve it. So, is that how we connect? Like, really connect with budding engineers? Tell them about the inspirational problem. Maybe if we haven't solved it yet, that's even better. That gives them the scope to imagine themselves in that team, chipping away at the bits that they can solve until the boulder's reduced to pebbles and they look back and their team's cured the disease, made the discovery, made the world a better place, answered those big questions. Or is it a new TV series with ideas of emerging new technologies, how they could be applied to as yet undreamed of new technologies, new inventions, teasers that inspire us to dream of a better future that maybe we could help to build? We wouldn't need perfect production, flawless celebrities. We don't need it to be funny or intimidatingly macho, have big egos and bigger explosions. We're selling to introverts. We need to have the confidence to be real, the courage to be imperfect, to be authentically ordinary, and just to have a really inspirational problem and plenty of room for people to help solve it. So what do you think? Do you work in a STEM profession? If so, what inspired you? What was that moment when you knew that this is what you wanted to do with your life? Or the moment that you felt the most affirmed in your career choice and proud of your role in the industry? What's the big picture challenge that your team's working to chip down and solve? Or would you call yourself an introvert? If so, who are your role models? What are the stories that influenced your career choice? The things that you've seen and heard throughout your life that in that moment you really connected with, that in that moment spoke to your heart? Please join the conversation. Quiet voice is just as welcome as loud. Tweet, blog, YouTube. Let's get talking about how to talk about science.